Positive sentiments are driving activities in the Nigerian equity market as it heads for a positive weekly close, with the all-share index year-to-date gains currently over 10%. Oluwaseun Dosunmu, the head of investment research at Parthian Securities, joins me now to discuss the major market drivers this week. Oluwaseun, thanks so much for your time. The first question I have to ask you is, are you surprised? Is this in line with the house view? I'm not sure many had called that the market will be up 10% in the first 2 months.
Okay, this is in line with our expectations, but not as high as 10%. I mean, when we started the year, we had the idea that this year might not move in line with the previous pre-election years. So, pre-election year in 2014 and 2018, the market always always closes in the negative. But this year, we decided to highlight the fact that things have changed. The market is now driven more by the domestic players. Crude oil prices are on the upturn. Then the interest rate environment, the fixed income market is also low. So these are the key drivers that are actually moving our markets currently.
Right. I would argue that the first point you made is perhaps the most significant one, that the market really has tilted away from the influence, if you like, of the foreign investors. Local investors really are dominating the market now, and they've seen it all. Many will suggest that they've seen election cycles and they've gotten used to it. But in your view, what do you think could give local investors some concern? Or do you think that some macro changes, like you mentioned low interest rates, if we saw interest rates begin to tick up significantly, could we see the market correct? What are your thoughts on what could really slow down this market movement?
Okay, so first of all, like you mentioned, if we start to see interest rates in the fixed income markets, move in the upward direction, definitely we would see a pullback in activities in the equity space. We would see funds flow out of the equity space into the fixed income markets. Also, if we start to see, a decline in global crude oil prices, because our market is positively correlated to the global crude oil prices. So if we start to see a pullback, like for instance, if OPEC comes up with, a policy of increasing oil outputs, that would definitely affect prices. If we see interest rates in the fixed income markets move higher than what it currently is, definitely this would impact the markets. Also, if we see earnings, that's full year earnings for 2021, if those earnings are not as impressive as, the Q4 numbers, then that would definitely affect investors' sentiment.
Right. Okay. Good point. Okay, let's focus on some sectors. The oil and gas space, and obviously there's been some negative news around the importation of substandard petrol into the country. Quite a few companies have taken the heat for that, if you like. But would you say that the impact of this is really nothing to focus on, and we're back to business as usual now?
The impact would not be as much as we would expect, and that's because this is a temporary setback. I believe before the end of the month, this issue will be resolved and we'll be back in business. But I think the focus now should be, crude oil prices in the international markets and OPEC's decision at their next meeting. I think these are the key drivers to the performance we would see in the oil and gas space.
Right.
Because if OPEC decides to increase oil output, definitely that is going to affect prices going forward. I don't expect, other countries like the US and the other countries that decided to push back last year to do the same.
Right.
From the strategic it's not a sustainable move. So we expect that, the markets will still be positive and tilting in favor of, the companies under the oil and gas space sector.
Looking at the broader macro environment, and no doubt the growth of the oil and gas space is linked to the oil price. My sense is that oil price is probably going to stay high, relatively high for the most part of this year. And I wonder how that will filter through to the broader economy. I'm beginning to get a sense that many may be underestimating the recovery that we may see this year. Or do you think that there are other factors that could hinder growth this year?
At the moment, I'm not seeing any. like I mentioned, it just depends on OPEC's decision whether or not to increase crude outputs. That is a key determinant going forward. Or that's the key determinant I see actually affecting that space. Because if we do not see OPEC making any rash decision, then we'll most likely see crude oil prices continue and even touch $100 per barrel. I know that in previous times, a lot of speculators and analysts have talked about crude oil prices touching $100 per barrel. We're not of that opinion, but this year we think that that is actually possible because we saw that Brent touched $93 per barrel. Then we saw a mild retracement to around $90 per barrel. And obviously, we know, like we always say, the market doesn't move in a straight line. There was bound to be correction at some point in time. So that's what we're actually seeing now. But for it to have touched that $93 per barrel, that's a major resistance point. Now it has touched that. We expect that, going forward with the demand that we're seeing across the globe, it will most likely go back there and even break that support, that resistance level.
Right. Okay, so let's be more specific now in terms of making calls. Which counters do you like right now? Which stocks are you recommending as your top choices?
Okay, while we don't like to just make these recommendations like this, but I feel like there are some stocks that you can look at that basically that have good upside potential. And another thing we need to look at is each individual's objectives. Some
Sure.
people are investors, some are traders.
But I'm just
So
looking at it in the
depending on your
context
investment
of,
objectives, you can look at definitely Seplat, you look at Total Energies. And Total Energies plays in the downstream oil and gas sector. I mean, you can look at that. The markets, obviously, the prices of these stocks have moved up higher. And, they still have at least a bit, the upside potential is still there. However, we need to be cautious going forward because right now the market is at levels that we haven't seen before. And also we need to take into consideration the earnings that are coming out. Once we start to see earnings, we start to see dividend declaration. After that agog state in the market, definitely we would see some form of retracements in the market. So
right.
I think those stocks.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for sticking your neck out and making those calls. I appreciate that. We've been speaking to Oluwaseun Dosunmu, the head of investment research at Parthian Securities.